What went wrong with Island Sanctuary, Final Fantasy XIV's farming simulator side content? We just got confirmation that the development of Island Sanctuary will stop in Dawntrail, with only minor updates in 7.0 and no updates after that from an interview with Yoshi P. As disappointed as I am, I can't say that I'm surprised. If you ask me, Island Sanctuary failed to deliver on the core idea of being a cozy casual farming simulator for players to have fun with over a long period of time while relaxing on an island. Instead, we got spreadsheets and limited time animal farming and production schedules, and you get the idea. Island Sanctuary ended up as another point of gameplay to be mostly optimized outside of the game with very limited gameplay attached to it. First of all, who actually likes the Island Workshop? Now don't get me wrong, I'm sure that there are people out there who like and enjoy the workshop planning and scheduling, but it shouldn't be a surprise that most people don't deal with it at all. There's a massive community of players who simply read weekly image guides that are posted on social media to plan their workshop schedules. They also use fancy calculators to determine what products to make and ship each day. A lot of this stuff is figured out by a wonderful team of players and communicated pretty much everywhere. While I do really appreciate what they do, I think that this isn't what I had in mind when I thought about a casual experience. People use these tools because actually figuring out how to best generate the currency isn't that interesting for most people. You want to enjoy the cozy island experience, not sit in front of a spreadsheet. I've seen a lot of people getting burnt out or just plain finding it boring because of this. It's also one of the few gameplay components that's strictly time-gated. Island Sanctuary involves a lot of waiting. It's the kind of thing I expect more from a free-to-play mobile game and not from an MMO with a subscription. You have to wait for buildings to complete, for certain animals to spawn, for things to craft. It's a little jarring coming from a game where you can craft whatever you want, whenever you want normally. I don't know about you, but I just want to be able to play without waiting for anything. Now I'm sure that these features exist because the developers wanted you to take your time. They knew that people would blitz through the content otherwise and finish it within a few weeks of launch without these limitations. The problem is, that's what happened anyway. Any MMO community is going to be determined to min-max the game as much as they can. Even if you have to wait for your workshop for the bulk of your leveling experience, there are plenty of people who are going to do whatever it takes, even if it means gathering for hours using macros that literally walk for you because nobody wants to do that manually. People are focused on figuring out how to play as little as possible. I'm willing to say that at large, we have progressed through the Island Sanctuary way faster than intended. To me, this isn't so much of a bad thing as far as the players are concerned, it's just a flaw in the design itself that it was even possible in the first place. Look at things like Boja and Eureka. These are two long-term grinding instances that give you reasons to keep coming back. Once you're finished with the story, you still have relic weapons to do. You can even come back to do more things for mounts, minions, and titles. It's also a decent way to make gil, and in the case of Boja, one of the fastest ways to level a job from 71 to 90. And speaking of levels, why is it limited to level 90 players who are finished with the 6.0 story of Endwalker? I understand how they chose to work it in narratively, but I think that it would have been much better for players if you could experience it early on. Even if you just weren't allowed to experience some of the story components until progressing through MSQ, it would have been a cool way for tons more players to find something that they enjoy early into their journey, instead of locking it behind over 100 hours of main story quest. It's not like it even contributes to the endgame anyway. It just doesn't really give you any reasons to come back to it. Once you're done with Island Sanctuary levels, there's not really a point to doing anything else on the island. Sure, outdoor furnishing was a nice addition, but if you aren't interested in that, it's kinda just dead content for you. The most you'll probably do is manage your workshop. Because everything funnels into the Cowrie system, you don't have to do much else to eventually have all of the cosmetics. There's no specific grind like catching certain fish or rare animals to get a secret mount or anything. If this sounds familiar, it's the same philosophy applied to the Manderville relic weapons. Do whatever you want and get tomes to spend. These grinds were designed to be approachable as easily as possible, and while it has merit, it often ends up lacking in satisfaction for the players. Think about what you can get from the Island Sanctuary. You're never going to be impressed when you see the alligator mount. Compare that to the two-seater bike mount from Boja. You know that someone went through all of the work it takes to grind every note if they have that. It's no walk in the park. Same for the Ozma mount with Eureka, or the Necromancer title, even all of the Ultimate Legend titles. These things mean something and players enjoy that for the most part. Now, I'm not saying that Island Sanctuary should have some really challenging content or anything. The reason that these things matter is that it gives players a reason to keep going back to the content. This is something that Island Sanctuary just doesn't have. You simply go to check it whenever a new update comes out. Then you grind it for a week or two at most, and then it's dead again, just like Criterion dungeons. Because there isn't a longer grind attached, people get tired of it pretty quickly. And speaking of reasons to come back, whether or not you're a returning viewer of mine or someone entirely new, thanks for making it this far into the video. As of the time of recording this, I'm 17 subscribers away from hitting 1,000 subs, which is a huge goal of mine, and the first step towards being monetized on YouTube. If you want to see more of my videos, consider subscribing. The support means a lot. Thanks again, and let's get back to it. Something else that I don't think worked out very well was a desire to keep it isolated from the rest of the game as well as other players. What you do in Island Sanctuary has no impact on anything else. It's entirely self-contained. The one real exception was the need for expert crafts. I like this, and even though it was probably annoying for people who don't craft, I thought that it was cool that you had to work with other players to do something on the island. I think that this was okay, especially because it didn't impact progression. One of the most popular components of modern farming simulators is co-op. When you open up games like Stardew Valley or even Palia, you can do stuff with your friends. You can tend farms together, take care of animals, and even go fishing together. You can't even gather on someone else's island in Final Fantasy. It just seemed like such an obvious way for players to spend time with each other, so I'm not sure why this wasn't a part of the experience, and it's a huge missed opportunity if you ask me. Even on a system level, removing isolation would have a lot of interesting implications. Imagine if doing island gathering gave you levels on your miner, botanist, or fisher based on the type of material being gathered. Not only would it give players an alternative to the diadem for leveling, it would allow players to experience the island who otherwise may never touch it. I like when features cross-pollinate throughout the game. For example, part of the reason that Boja can maintain a population is because it's such a great tool for leveling. Having multiple reasons to do content is a good thing for the longevity of the game. What if we scrapped the workshop entirely and relied on players contributing with their own crafts similar to the firmament? Or even make a crafting minigame streamlined in the same way that island gathering is that allows players to level up their crafters. I think that you could still keep some form of automation around, but it would be cool to have more engaging gameplay for crafting. And if you think about it, lore-wise, a max-level crafter who has maybe done relics is incredibly accomplished throughout the world of Eorzea. Why wouldn't the Warrior of Light have a hand in crafting goods for their own island? This could also be a decent way to allow players to get around the time-gating elements. Maybe you could manually craft your own buildings or just wait if you didn't feel like it. Also, just imagine a huge shared zone that everyone could gather in. Personally, I was excited at the idea of running into other players having fun on the island. There'd be so many random opportunities to socialize and chat that would make it a much more connected experience. Maybe you'd be able to form parties to team up and go on mining expeditions to mass gather certain materials. There are tons of possibilities here. On the topic of isolation, it sucks how limited the multiplayer component even is. I don't want to call outdoor furnishing too little too late because it is a cool feature, and I'm glad that they worked through the technical hurdle to add it. I just wish that we could actually show off islands to other players. There's a huge and thriving community of housing designers that love to show off their hard work. There are plenty of websites and discords where people share their housing designs, and a lot of designers love visitors. As long as you're in the same region, there are a ton of cool houses that you can visit for yourself to see in-game. Unfortunately for Island Sanctuary, you just can't do that. You can't visit an island unless you're friends with the owner, which drastically limits how much you can share your hard work. Why this is the case, I'm not sure, but it's such wasted potential if you ask me, because outdoor furnishing was previously only available to homeowners. I've already seen some really crazy island builds, and I'll never be able to visit them myself. Another minor criticism is that it kinda sucks to have an island paradise where I can't even place items on the beach. It would have been cool to have something like multiple furnishing zones, instead of just being limited to where the workshops are. That would have been a lot of fun to have, and I'm sure that you'd see some crazy builds in the Sanctuary if that were a feature. Now don't get me wrong, honestly, I'm really happy that Island Sanctuary exists, even if I think that it didn't work out very well. It's cool that Square tried to incorporate this type of gameplay into 14, and I'm saying this as someone who loves to play these kinds of games a lot. That being said, to improve Island Sanctuary, it would require reworking it entirely to fix some of the biggest issues. And I have no doubts that Square is actually looking at how many people are even staying in the Sanctuary in the first place. Why spend so much development time if people are going to barely use it? To me, that's why it makes sense to just do something new in Dawntrail. That also gives the story team a good lore reason to have the new lifestyle content take full advantage of the new locations and world building being done for Dawntrail. Ironically, my first thought would be some kind of island paradise, but we already have that, so I'm curious about what they can conjure up for the new world. I'm glad that we know that we're getting something new at the very least. If you made it this far, let me know how you feel in the comments. Were you expecting Island Sanctuary to be worked on permanently? Or are you bored of it and glad that it's done? I'd love to hear your thoughts and consider joining my Discord as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.